This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I'm glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. 60 years and 10 is the allotted time for an individual man, but nations number their years by thousands. According to this fact, you are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is the hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
You can go ahead.
The eye of the reformer is met with angry flashes, portending disastrous times, but his heart may well beat lighter at the thought that America is young and that she is still in the impressible stage of her existence. May he not hope that high lessons of wisdom, of justice, and of truth will yet give direction to her destiny? Were the nation older, the patriot's heart might be sadder and the reformer's brow heavier. Its future might be shrouded in gloom, and the hope of its prophets go out in sorrow. There is consolation in the thought that America is young. Great streams are not easily turned from channels worn deep in the course of ages. They may sometimes rise in quiet and stately majesty and inundate the land, refreshing and fertilizing the earth with their mysterious properties. They may also rise in wrath and fury, and bear away on their angry waves the accumulated wealth of years of toil and hardship. They, however, gradually flow back to the same old channel and flow on as serenely as ever. But while the river may not be turned aside, it may dry up and leave nothing behind but the withered branch, the unsightly rock, to howl in the abyss, sweeping wind, the sad tale of departed glory. As with rivers, so with nations. Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government, and England as the fatherland. This home government, you know, although a considerable distance from your home, did, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives, impose upon its colonial children such restraints, burdens, and limitations as, in its mature judgment, it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers, who had not adopted the fashionable idea of this day, of the infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far in their excitement as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers.
Such a declaration of agreement on my part.
So, Mary, I'm not seeing you on stage for some reason. I see you backstage. I'm going to remove you and try again.
Such a declaration of agreement on my part would not be worth much to anybody. It would certainly prove nothing as to what part I might have taken had I lived during the great controversy of 1776. To say now that America was right and England wrong is exceedingly easy. Everybody can say it. The dastard, not less than the noble brave, can flippantly descant on the tyranny of England towards the American colonies. It is fashionable to do so, but there was a time when to pronounce against England and in favor of the cause of the colonies tried men's souls. They who did so were accounted in their day plotters of mischief, agitators, and rebels, dangerous men. To side with the right against the wrong, with the weak against the strong, and with the oppressed against the oppressor. Here lies the merit and the one which of all others seems unfashionable in our day. The cause of liberty may be stabbed by the men who glory in the deeds of your fathers. But to proceed. Feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. Their conduct was wholly unexceptionable. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn, yet they persevered. They were not the men to look back. As the sheet anchor takes a firmer hold when the ship is tossed by the storm, so did the cause of your fathers grow stronger, as it breasted the chilling blasts of kingly displeasure. The greatest and best of British statesmen admitted its justice, and the loftiest eloquence of the British Senate came to its support. But with that blindness, which seems to be unvarying characteristic of tyrants, since Pharaoh and his hosts were drowned in the Red Sea, the British government persisted in the exactions complained of. The madness of this course, we believe, is admitted now, even by England, but we fear the lesson is wholly lost on our present ruler. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under his treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of total separation of the colonies from the crown was born.
It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regarded. The timid and the prudent, as has been intimidated of that day, were of course shocked and alarmed by it. Such people lived then, had lived before, and will probably ever have a place on this planet, and their course in respect to any great change, no matter how great and good to be attained, or the wrong to be redressed by it, may be calculated with as much precision as can be the course of the stars. They hate all changes, but silver, gold, and copper change. Of this sort of change, they are always strongly in favor. These people were called Tories in the days of your fathers, and the appellation probably conveyed the same idea that is meant by a more modern, though a somewhat less euphonious term, which we often find in our papers applied to some of our old politicians. This opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it. On the 2nd day of July, 1776, in the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution, and as we seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal to this, it may refresh your minds and help my story if I read it. Resolved that the United Colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all the allegations to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, and the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance.
I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost. From the round top of your ship of the state, dark and threatening clouds may have been seen. Heavy billows like mountains in the distance disclose to the leeward huge forms of flinty rocks. That bolt drawn, that chain broken, and all is lost. Cling to this day, cling to it, and to its principles, with the grasp of a storm-tossed mariner, to a spar at midnight. The coming into being of a nation in any circumstances is an interesting event. But besides general considerations, there were peculiar circumstances which make the advent of this republic an event of special attractiveness. The whole scene, as I look back to it, was a simple, dignified, and sublime. The population of the country at the time stood at the insignificant number of 3 millions. The country was poor in munitions of war. The population was weak and scattered, and the country a wilderness unsubdued. There were no means of concert and combination, such as exist now. Neither steam nor lightning had then been reduced to order and discipline. From the Potomac to Delaware was a journey of many days. Under these and innumerable other disadvantages, your fathers declared for liberty and independence and triumphed. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to give fame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to rise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point of which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did, the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory.
They loved their country better than their own private interest. And though this is not the highest form of human excellence, all will concede that this is a rare virtue, and that when it is exhibited, it ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interests. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, But they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. They seized upon eternal principles and set a glorious example in their defense. Mark them. Can you start again? You're muted.
Fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, honorably inviting the scrutiny of an onlooking world, reverently appealing to heaven to attest their sincerity, soundly comprehending the solemn responsibility they were about to assume, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them, your fathers, the fathers of this republic, did most deliberately, under the inspiration of a glorious patriotism and with a sublime faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, lay deep the cornerstone of the national superstructure which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. Banners and pennants wave exultingly on the breeze. The din of business, too, is hushed. Even Mammon seems to have quitted his grasp on this day. The ear-piercing fife and the stirring drum unite their accents with the ascending peal of 1,000 church bells. Prayers are made, hymns are sung, and sermons are preached in honor of this day. While the quick martial tramp of a great and multitudinous nation echoed back all the hills, valleys, and mountains of a vast continent, bespeak the occasion of thrilling and universal interest, nation's jubilee. Friends and citizens, I need not enter further into the causes which led to this anniversary. Many of you understand them better than I do. You could instruct me in regard to them. That is a branch of knowledge in which you feel perhaps a much deeper interest than your speaker. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I remember also that as a people, Americans are remarkably familiar with all facts which make in their own favor. This is esteemed by some as a national trait, perhaps a national weakness. It is a fact that whatever makes for the wealth or for the reputation of Americans and can be had cheap will be found by Americans. I shall not be charged with slandering Americans. If I say I think the American side of any question may be safely left in American hands. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to other gentlemen whose claim to have been regularly descended will be less likely to be disputed than mine. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and his cause is the ever living now. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present. Heart within and God overhead. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. To all inspiring motives, to noble deeds which can be gained from the past, we are welcome. But now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to recover your indolence.
Sidney Smith tells us that men seldom utilize the wisdom and virtues of their fathers, but to excuse some folly or wickedness of their own. This truth is not a doubtful one. There are illustrations of it near and remote, ancient and modern. It was fashionable, hundreds of years ago, for the children of Jacob to boast, "We have Abraham to our father," when they had long lost Abraham's faith and spirit. That people contented themselves under the shadow of Abraham's great name, while they repudiated the deeds which made his name great. Need I remind you that a similar thing is being done all over this country today? Need I tell you that the Jews are not the only people who built the tombs of the prophets, who garnished the sepulchres of the righteous? Washington could not die till he had broken the chains of his slaves. Yet his monument is built up by the price of human blood, and the traitors in the bodies and souls of men shout, "We have Washington to our father." Alas, that it should be so, yet so it is. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, for both your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him? Who so subordinate and dead to the claims of gratitude that he would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee, when the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs? I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak, and the lame man leaps as in heart.
Great job, Morrow. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in the joyous anthems. Were in humane mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct. And let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, lowering up to heaven, were thrown down by the breath of life, breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrecoverable ruin. I can today take up the plaintive lament of a peeled and woe-smitten people. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. We wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they who wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wails of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view, standing there, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine. I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July.
Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call into question and denounce with all emphasis, I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can to command, and not one word shall escape me, that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, shall not confess the right to be just. But I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, is it in just this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make favorable impressions on the public mind? Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed.
But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? I must undertake to prove that the slave is a man. That is a point already conceded. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholder themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia, which, if committed by a Black man, no matter how ignorant he be, subject him to the punishment of death. While only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted in the fact that the Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding under severe fines the penalties, the teachings of the slave to read or to write. When you can point to any such law in reference to the beast of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea, and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. It is not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in the metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we're engaged in a manner of enterprise common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and all above, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty, that he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is that a question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty involving a doubtful implication of principles of justice hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have a natural right to freedom, speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively, To do so will make myself ridiculous, and it will offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know slavery is wrong for him. What am I to argue? That it's wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters. Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employment for my time and strength than such argument would imply.
What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine? That God did not establish it? That our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There's a blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? They that can may, I cannot. The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability, and I could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The consciousness of the conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer a day that reveals to him, more than all the other days in the year, the gross injustice and the cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than there are the people of the United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world, travel through South America, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. Take the American slave trade, which we are told by papers is especially prosperous just now. Ex-Senator Benton tells us that the price of men was never higher than now. He mentions the fact to show that slavery is in no danger. This trade is one of the peculiarities of the American institutions. It is carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this confederacy, and millions are pocketed every year by dealers in this horrid traffic. In several states, this trade is chief source of wealth. It is called, in contradiction to the foreign slave trade, the internal slave trade. It is probably called so too, in order to divert it from the horror which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. The trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy. It has been denounced with burning words from the high places of the nation, execrable traffic. To arrest it, to put an end to it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhuman traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and man. The duty to extirpate and destroy it, admitted even by doctors of divinity. In order to put an end to it, some of these last have consented that their colored brethren should leave this country and establish themselves on the western coast of Africa. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much exoneration is poured out by Americans upon these engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between these states pass through without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable. Behold the practical operation of this slave trade. The American slave trade sustained by American politics and an American religion, where here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what it is, swine drover. I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all of our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with a pistol, whip, and a Bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill. Mark the sad procession as it moves warily along, and the inhuman wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries off on his affrighted captives. There, see the old man with locks, thin gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See, too, that girl of 13 weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she was been torn.
The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly, you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank and the chains rattle simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. That gash on her shoulder tells her to move on. Follow the drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget that the deep, sad sobs that arose from the scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking. Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States. I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. When a child, my soul was often pierced with a sense of its horrors. I lived on Philpott Street, Fells Point, Baltimore, and have watched from the wharves the slave ships in the basin, anchored from the shore, with their cargoes of human flesh, waiting for favorable winds to waft them down the Chesapeake. There was at that time a grand slave market kept at the head of Pratt Street by Austin Woldfolk. His agents were sent into every town and county in Maryland, announcing their arrival through the papers and on flaming handbills headed "Cash for Negroes." These men were generally well-dressed men and very captivating in their manners, ever ready to drink, to treat, and to gamble. The fate of many a slave has depended upon the turn of a single card, and many a child has been snatched from the arms of its mother by bargains arranged in a state of brutal drunkenness. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by the dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number have been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night, for since the anti-slavery agitation, a certain caution is observed. In the deep, still darkness of midnight, I have often been aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the piteous cries of the chained gangs that passed our door. The anguish of my boyish heart was intense, and I was often consoled when speaking to my mistress in the morning to hear her say that the custom was very wicked, that she hated to hear the rattle of the chains and the heartrending cries. I was glad to find one who sympathized with me in my horror.
You can begin.
Thank you. Sorry. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is, today, an active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There, I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight. Is this the land your fathers loved, the freedom which they toiled to win? Is this the earth whereon they moved? Are these the graves they slumber in? But a still more inhuman, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be preserved. An act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. By that act, Mason and Dixon line separated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States. The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He's a bird for the sportsman. By that most foul, fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is hunting ground for men, not for thieves and robbers, enemies of society, merely, but for men guilty of no crime. Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state, your lords, nobles, and ecclesiastics enforce as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God that you do this accursed thing. No fewer than 40 Americans have, within the past 2 years, been hunted down and, without a moment's warning, hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent upon them for bread, but of this no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage and to all rights in this republic, the rights of God included. For Black men, there are neither law, justice, humanity, not religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and 5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any 2 villains is sufficient under this hell-black enactment. to send the most pious and exemplary Black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witnesses for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor. Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe, and are bound in deciding in the case of a man's liberty, hear only his accusers. Glaring violation of justice, shameless disregard of the forms of administering law, arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislation. I doubt if there be another nation on the globe having the brass and the baseness to put such a law on the statute book. If any man in this assembly thinks differently from me in this matter and feels able to disprove my statements, I will gladly confront him at any suitable time and place he may select.
I take this law to be one of the grossest infringements of Christian liberty. And if the churches and ministers of our country were not stupidly blind or most wickedly indifferent, they too would so regard it. At the very moment that they are thanking God for the enjoyment of civil and religious liberty and for the right to worship God according to the dictates of their own consciousness, they are utterly silent in respect to a law which robs religions of its chief significance and make it utterly worthless to the world lying in wickedness. Did this law concern the mint, anise, and cumin, abridge the right to sing psalms, to partake in the sacrament, or to engage in any of its ceremonies or religions, it would be smitten by the thunder of 1,000 pulpits. A general shout will go up from the church demanding repeal, repeal, instant repeal. And it will go hard with that politician who presumed to solicit the voice of the people without inscribing this motto on his banner. Further, if this demand was not complied with, another Scotland will be added to the history of religion's liberty, and the stern of old Covenanters would be thrown into the shade. A John Knox would be seen at every church door and heard from every pulpit, and Fillmore will have no more quarter than was shown by Knox to the beautiful but treacherous Queen Mary of Scotland. The fact that the church of our country, with fictional exception, does not esteem the fugitive slave law as a declaration of war against religious liberty implies that the church regards religion simply as a form of worship, an empty ceremony, and not a vital principle, requiring active benevolence and justice, love and goodwill towards man. It assumes surface sacrifice above mercy, psalm singing above right doing, solemn meeting above practical righteousness. A worship that can be conducted by persons who refuse to give shelter to the houseless, to give bread to the hunger, clothing to the naked, and who enjoin obedience to a law forbidding these acts of mercy is a curse, not a blessing, to mankind. The Bible addressed all these persons as scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites who pay tithe of mint, anise, and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith.
But the church of this country is not only indifferent to the wrongs of the slave, it actually takes sides with the oppressors. It has made itself the bulwark of American slavery and the shield of American slave hunters. Many of the most eloquent divines who stand as the very lights of the church have shamelessly given the sanction of religion and the Bible to the whole slave system. They have taught that man may properly be a slave, that the relation of master and slave is ordained of God, that to send back an escaped bondman to his master is clearly the duty of all the followers of the Lord Jesus Christ. And this horrible blasphemy is palmed off upon the world for Christianity. For my part, I would say, welcome infidelity, welcome atheism, welcome anything in preference to the gospel as preached by those divines. They convert the very name of religion into an engine of tyranny and barbarous cruelty, and serve to confirm more infidels in this age than all the infidel writings of Thomas Paine, Voltaire, and Bolingbroke put together have done. These ministers make religion a cold and flinty-hearted thing, having neither principles of right action nor bowels of compassion. They strip the love of God of its beauty and leave the throne of religion a huge, horrible, repulsive form. It is a religion for oppressors, tyrants, man-stealers, and thugs. It is not that pure and undefiled religion which is from above, and which is first pure, then peaceable, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, but a religion which favors the rich against the poor, which exalts the proud above the humble, which divides mankind into two classes, tyrants and slaves, which says to the man in chains, stay there, and to the oppressor, oppress on. It is a religion which may be professed and enjoyed by all the robbers and enslavers of mankind. It makes God a respecter of persons, denies his fatherhood of the race, and tramples in the dust the great truth of the brotherhood of man. All this we affirm to be true of the popular church and the popular worship of our land and nation, a religion, a church, and a worship which on the authority of inspired wisdom we pronounce to be an abomination in the sight of God. In the language of Isaiah, the American church might be well addressed. Bring no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn meeting. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hateth. They are a trouble to me. I am weary to bear them. And when ye spread forth your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Yea, when ye make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Cease to do evil. Learn to do well. Seek judgment. Relieve the oppressed. Judge for the fatherless. Plead for the widow. The American church is guilty when viewed in connection with what it is doing to uphold slavery, but it is superlatively guilty when viewed in connection with its ability to abolish slavery. The sin of which it is guilty is one of omission as well as commission. Albert Barnes but uttered what the common sense of every man at all observant of the actual state of the case will receive as truth, when he declared that there is no power out of the church that could sustain slavery an hour, if it were not sustained in it. Let the religious press, the pulpit, the Sunday school, the conference meeting, the great ecclesiastical, missionary, Bible and tract associations of the land array their immense powers against slavery and slaveholding, and the whole system of crime and blood would be scattered to the wind. And that they do not do this involves them in the most awful responsibility of which the mind can conceive. In prosecuting the anti-slavery enterprise, we have been asked to spare the church, to spare the ministry. But how, we ask, could such a thing be done? We are met on the threshold of our efforts for the redemption of the slave by the church and ministry of the country, in battle arrayed against us, and we are compelled to fight or flee. From what quarter, I beg to know, has proceeded a fire so deadly upon our ranks during the last 2 years as from the northern pulpit? As the champions of oppressors, the chosen men of American theology have appeared, men honored for their so-called piety and their real learning. The Lords of Buffalo, the Springs of New York, the Lathrops of Auburn, the Coxes and Spencers of Brooklyn, the Ganetts and Sharps of Boston, the Deways of Washington, and other great religious lights of the land have, in utter denial of the authority of him by whom they profess to be called to the ministry, deliberately taught us against the examples of the Hebrews and against the remonstrance of the apostles. They teach that we ought to obey man's law before the law of God.
Sharice, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. My spirit wearies of such blasphemy, and how such men can be supported as the standing types and representatives of Jesus Christ is a mystery which I leave others to penetrate. In speaking of the American church, however, let it be distinctly understood that I mean the great mass of the religious organizations of our land. There are exceptions, and I thank God that there are. Noble men may be found scattered all over these northern states, of whom Henry Ward Beecher of Brooklyn, Samuel J. May of Syracuse, and my esteemed friend, Reverend R.R. Raymond, on the platform are shining examples. And let me say further that upon these men lies the duty to inspire our ranks with high religious faith and zeal, and to cheer us on in the great mission of the slave's redemption from his chains. One is struck with the difference between the attitude of the American church towards the anti-slavery movement and that occupied by the churches in England towards a similar movement in that country. There, the church, true to this mission of ameliorating, elevating, and improving the condition of mankind, came forward, promptly bound up the wounds of the West Indian slave and restored him to his liberty. There, the question of emancipation was a highly religious question. It was demanded in the name of humanity and according to the law of the living God. The Sharps, the Clarksons, the Wilberforces, the Broxtons, the Birchills, the Nips were alike famous for their piety and for their philanthropy. The anti-slavery movement, there was not an anti-church movement, for the reason that the church took its full share in persecuting that movement. And the anti-slave movement in this country will cease to be an anti-church movement when the church of this country shall assume a favorable instead or a hostile position towards that movement. Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation, as embodied in the two great political parties, is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You hurl your anthems at the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Australia and pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad. Honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land, you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system as barbarous and dreadful as ever stained the character of a nation, a system begun in avarice, supported in pride, and perpetuated in cruelty. You shed tears over fallen Hungary and make the sad story of her wrongs the theme of your poets, statesmen, and orators, till your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against her oppression. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence and would hail him as an enemy of a nation who dares to make those wrongs subject of public discourse. You're all on fire at the mention of the liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America. You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which in its very essence casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hand-earned farthing from the grasp of the Black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another. Yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are not colored like your own. You declare before the world and are understood by the world to declare that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose a 7th part of the inhabitants of your country. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It It corrupts the politicians at home.
It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth. It is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it. And yet you cling to it as if it were the sheet anchor of all your hopes. Oh, be warned, be warned. A horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever. But it is answered in reply to all this that precisely what I have now denounced is in fact guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States. That the right to hold and to hunt slaves is a part of that Constitution framed by the illustrious fathers of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your fathers stooped, basely stooped, to palter with us in a double sense and keep the word of promise to the ear, but break it to the heart. And instead of being the honest men I have before declared them to be, they were the veriest impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is the inevitable conclusion, and from it, there is no escape. But I differ from those who charge this baseness on the framers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least, so I believe. There is not time now to argue the constitutional question at length, nor have I the ability to discuss it as it ought to be discussed. The subject has been handled with masterly power by Lysander Spooner, Esquire, by William Goodell, by Samuel E. Sewell, Esquire, and last, though not least, by Garrett Smith, Esquire. These gentlemen have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour. Fellow citizens, there is no matter in respect to which the people of the North have allowed themselves to be so ruinously imposed upon as that of the pro-slavery character of the Constitution. In that instrument, I hold there is neither warrant, justification, license, permission, nor sanction, legal standing of the hateful thing, but interpreted as it ought to be interpreted. The Constitution is a glorious liberty document. Read its preamble, consider its purposes. Is slavery among them? Is it at the gateway or is it in the temple? Is it neither? While I do not intend to argue this question on the present occasion, let me ask if it be not somewhat singular that if the Constitution were intended to be, by its framers and adopters, a slave-holding instrument, why neither slavery, slave-holding, nor slave can anywhere be found in it? What would be thought of an instrument drawn up, legally drawn up for the purpose of entitling, giving ownership to the city of Rochester to a tract of land in which no mention of land was made? Now, there are certain rules of interpretation for the proper understanding of all legal instruments. These rules are well established. They are plain, common sense rules, such as you and I and all of us can understand and apply without having passed years in the study of law. I scout the idea that the question of the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of slavery is not a question for the people. I hold that every American citizen has a right to form an opinion of the Constitution and to propagate that opinion and to use all honorable means to make his opinion the prevailing one. Without this right, the liberty of an American citizen would be as insecure as that of a Frenchman. Ex-Vice President Dallas tells us that the Constitution is an object to which no American mind can be too attentive and no American heart too devoted. He further says The Constitution, in its words, is plain and intelligible and is meant for the homebred, unsophisticated understandings of our fellow citizens. Senator Berrien tells us that the Constitution is the fundamental law, that which controls all others.
The Charter of our Liberties, which every citizen has a personal interest in understanding thoroughly. The testimony of Senator Breezy, Lewis Cass, and many others that might be named, who are everywhere esteemed as sound lawyers, so regard the Constitution. I take it, therefore, that it is not presumption in a private citizen to form an opinion of that instrument. Now, take the Constitution according to its plain reading, and I defy the presentation of a single pro-slavery clause in it. On the other hand, it will be found to contain principles and purposes entirely hostile to the existence of slavery. I'm going to pass it on to my sister Karen. I'm going to pass it on to my sister Karen. I'm going to pass it on to my sister Karen.
The arm of commerce? Is that where I'm beginning?
I'm going to pass it on to my sister Karen.
The arm of commerce? Is that where I'm beginning?
I'm going to pass it on to my sister Karen.
The arm of commerce? Is that where I'm beginning?
So Karen, you have something else on in the background that you need to log out of. And then you're starting with, I have detained my audience.
Got it. Oh, my goodness. My apologies. Where is that? I have detained my audience entirely too long. At some future period, I will gladly avail myself of an opportunity to give this subject a full and fair discussion. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I, therefore, leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time was when such could be done. Long established customs of hurtful character could formally fence themselves in and do their evil work with social impunity. Knowledge was then confined and enjoyed by the privileged few, and the multitude walked on in mental darkness. But a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable.
The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. It makes its pathway over and under the sea, as well as on the earth. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. from Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. The far-off and almost fabulous Pacific rolls in grandeur at our feet. The celestial empire, the mystery of ages, is being solved. The fiat of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent its force. No abuse, no outrage, whether in taste, sport, or avarice, can now hide itself from the all-pervading light. The iron shoe and crippled foot of China must be seen in contrast with nature. Africa must rise and put on her yet unwoven garment. Ethiopia shall stretch out her hand unto God. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it, God speed the year of Jubilee, the wide world, when from their galling chains set free, the oppressed shall vilely bend the knee and wear the yoke of tyranny. Like brutes, no more, that year will come, and freedom's reign to man his plundered rights again restore. God speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe. God speed the hour, the glorious hour, when none on earth shall exercise a lordly power, nor in a tyrant's presence cower, but all to manhood's stature tower, by equal birth. That hour will come, to each, to all, and from his prison house the thrall, go forth. Until that year, day, hour arrive, with head and heart and hand I'll strive, to break the rod and rend the gyve, the spoiler of his prey deprive. So witness heaven, and never from my chosen post, whatever the peril or the cost, be driven.
Well, I'm going to add back to the stage some of our readers who are still here. Thank you so much for joining. You all have been amazing. Thank you for those who've taken time out of your barbecuing and whatever else to join us in this conversation. I'm going to just shout out everyone really quickly. We had Dennis who started us off, Anna and Mary. We had Tyranny and Daniel. I think Daniel and Morrow were our youngest. Morrow is 10. We had Tyrone couldn't make it. So Mary, thank you so much. Ikem, Dr. Annette Nunnally, and did she bring it? Kene, let's see. Let me add more people to the stage here. There we go. We had, of course, Karen Loudon. We had Jennifer, who is not just an amazing educator. She is also someone who's run for office. Someone needs to mute in the background, like some other device you have on, because there was a little echo coming on. We had Carolyn, who I call Minister Carolyn. Thank you so much for joining. We have my amazing brother, who is actually out of the country, but still said, I'm going to be a part of this. Gilbert, thank you. Low-key Prophet Gilbert. Sharice Milton, and oh my God, was she feeling it? She brought a word. Tony Shelton, y'all. Tony, if you don't mind, if you can get into the chat and add your information. I've lost track of how many books Tony has authored. I think 13, 14. I don't know. She publishes a new one every 2 weeks, and they're all great. No, I'm not kidding. They're all great. She's phenomenal. So thank you, Tony Shelton. And of course, Kosi, who brought it in. Thank you, everyone. So any thoughts? Was this your first time reading the entire speech? Because here's what I know in America and across the world. There are things that we quote, but it's literally we just know 2 words from it or 1 sentence, and we've never read the whole thing in context. So for instance, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Everybody's just like this one snippet, but then they don't read anything else. So I'm assuming many of us had heard of Frederick Douglass's speech, but prior to prepping for this, had you looked at the entire speech? Any one of you who wants to jump in, go for it.
I have heard it read in its entirety multiple times. I have not sat and read through it myself.
Thank you. Did it make a difference listening versus reading it?
For me, because I'm a reader, both for pleasure and for study, it's easy to read through something quickly and not necessarily get the same impact. I will say that participating in this particular reading was it made a vast difference. It really did.
Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Dr. Nonale? I see you nodding your head.
I have heard it before. I never read it entirety until this project. And I sat quietly and tried to place myself during that time frame as if I was a free woman just in the audience listening. And I tried to give the feeling that I thought that he was giving the people in the audience. You expect me to participate in an event and my people are not free. I had to sit with that for a moment because I used to wear red, white, and blue and be at all the barbecues and cookouts, but I had to sit with that. I just had to sit with it. Thank you for the opportunity. This was wonderful.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for bringing that up because, that's what you're supposed to do show you're patriotic is to do all of this, but not really thinking about what was this celebration back then? What is it still today with all of the rulings that are coming down, with all of the ways that our rights are being stripped today? But let's hear from some other people. And I want to bring some young people in too. Now, Dennis and Daniel had to run to another event that they had. I'm trying to get Mauro back in here, but you can pull your seat up and join the frame. But Kosi, how about you? Let's hear from some younger folks, and then certainly everybody, please, put your voice.
I would say that one, I definitely hadn't read the entire speech before. I think, like you said, with American education, a lot of times we get little snippets of it or summaries, but not the full impact of the words. And I think there was always that cherry picking of what they feel is more digestible. So reading the whole thing and being able to be a part of reading out loud definitely was very insightful for me.
Anyone else?
I had read it possibly when I was in high school, young girl. And so I didn't have the same, depth that I have now. So to read it again at this age and be able to identify with not just the words and the feeling as a Black person, but the entire circumstances of our government and everything that's going on right now. So it was really good to actually be able to see it or read through it all the way and be able to identify with it more personally now.
Okay. Want to say anything?
Yes, sir. I have not read this speech before. I thought it was very empowering, especially the part that I read where it's really showing wow, there's just this disconnect between us and you because y'all are celebrating your independence and celebrating that type of, oh, we're free when you yet still do what you're doing to these other people. And it just shows it was just a lot of power from that. So I really liked reading it and listening to it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other comments? I'm gonna recheck the chat. Oh, hold on. I need to read what let's see, Dennis, who started us off, just sent this. Oh Lord. Okay. He said, I'm preparing a statement. Please read it. And so this is from Dennis. For those of you who you can go back, if you got in late, you can go back to the YouTube channel and start it from the beginning, because every reader was incredibly powerful. But Dennis started us off and he said this. He's, I believe, a second-year student, college student. What? Oh, okay. He said, the need for Douglas's words remains even today, 250 years as our nation is no longer a child, as he described. In 250 years of progress, we have gained the right to vote, had a president of color, and have sat in rooms our ancestors could only dream of being background pieces in. Yet somehow, because we have gotten comfortable, we have allowed the last two to undo the progress, to undo the advancements of the last 250. In the day of Frederick Douglass, even among his fellow allies in the abolitionist cause, the audience of the speech, he felt the need to preface, and however true to his actual beliefs, pander. So he was speaking truth to power. Those before us literally laid their lives down so that we do not have to hold our tongues. Okay, y'all, this is written by Dennis, I think is 19. Okay, he said, those before us literally laid their lives down so that we do not have to hold our tongues. Yet we still do not raise our voices. Even in our maturity as a nation reaching 250, we are still naive. Is it only when they take another one of our lives, showing ours are worth less than theirs, that we awaken from the slumbers of complacency? Today, we are empowered with innumerable platforms and countless opportunities, and we should not allow injustice persist because we are distracted. Instead, we should point out the irony in our land of the free until it really becomes one. He says we should point out the cruel irony in our land of the free until it really becomes one. That is from a 19-year-old. All right, what say y'all?
I was just sitting here really considering this idea of irony, right? That it's Independence Day, but it's only for a select group, first of all. And you declare the nation independent of its own enslavers, but you are enslaving at the same time, right? More than half the nation at that point. And I was just thinking, maybe because I am not a born American, I wasn't born in the United States of America, and I come from somewhere else. So having read...
Oh, they're coming for your citizenship.
Well, but that's my point exactly. I don't hold it. I don't have it. It's not mine. I don't consider it, my personal property, this idea of being a citizen of the United States of America, right? And so for me, the 4th of July, and I'm thinking here of Frederick Douglass standing in front of an audience of mixed people who are Americans, right? And people who are enslaved at the same time. And so that group, that mindset that he's trying to bring across to them, that, this is not it, right? And the idea that you are going to be a citizen of this country and be a person who is also, independent, you really have to consider that before you think about this 4th of July thing. Right? So I'm in a quandary. And I won't even bring up the church because, that,
Why
causes-
don't you want to bring up the church?
Mm.
He brought up the church, and then it said, "Don't hold your tongue." Why don't you want to bring up the church?
The church. Me and the church are at odds right now, so I probably shouldn't talk about them. Let's leave them alone.
It's interesting that you use the word quandary because to me, the quandary is that, well, a quandary, there are many, is these calls and this call by Frederick Douglass and the calls of people today. And if you've heard the speech of the mayor of New York, these calls to hold the country accountable to its principles, its founding principles and its ideals, and the hypocrisy of not doing so. There are people who see no hypocrisy because they meant what they said. It's who they meant it for. So when you call for the recognition of everyone's full humanity and everyone's rights, if you rights and freedoms, if you tie that to a national identity, then you are arguing that you get these freedoms from this nation because this nation is great, as opposed to you get these freedoms and these rights because you are human. And that's the dilemma I always see in any argument where this nation is great and it was founded on these, even from the great Frederick Douglass. This nation is great and we have these founding principles and you should give it to all men and women, we would say now. You don't get them because of the nation. And if you do that, then you have hobbled yourself, because then you're in an argument as to whose nation is it and who gets to define whose nation it is and who gets to define who is a citizen and therefore has these rights and freedoms.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? I'm going through the comments. Some people are definitely triggered and their anti-Blackness is showing, and that's okay, because maybe some seed will be planted in their spirits. Otherwise, you can go to hell. You can go to hell. You're headed there anyway. You all created it. So yeah, not bothered with you. You are being exactly who your ancestors were. So no surprises here. Anyone else want to share? We're not going to keep you all for long. We just wanted to, on this day, as people are going, to the lake and to the beaches and barbecuing and all of that, even God was like, I'm looking at the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and the fact that they're having to shut everything down. The things are falling from the scaffolding or whatever that they created. People are passing out. When he was sworn into office, you guys know I'm talking about the felon in chief, 34-time convicted felon. It was so cold, people couldn't come out. Do you guys not think maybe God is sending a message? Like, I'm just saying. But anyway, here we go. So I wanted to hear from our youngest person, who was one of the youngest ones who was here, to find out what he thought about participating in this. Is he here? Hey, hi, Morrow. We can't hear you. You're muted. Now you're gone. And now you're muted. Okay, we're going to figure it out. All right. I do want to hear from our educator. She's been in the classroom for many, many years. How did it feel being a part of this? What are your thoughts? And that would be you, Miss Jennifer Lee.
I was like, I don't know who you're talking about. In reading it, I've looked at this a few times in my life, but in actually reading my particular section, I had pauses. They were not intended to be dramatic pauses. They were pauses more for emotional reasons because it resonates so deeply today. And specifically, I see the roots for the Black Lives Matter movement when at the bottom of page 8, it was saying some of these have wives and children dependent upon them for bread, but this of no account was made. And literally, Black Lives Matter. This is why we say Black Lives Matter. And just seeing that and realizing, you know, as an educator, I would talk about history, the history of education, and talk about, you know, discrimination and things like that. And I would show videos, and occasionally a student would fall asleep, wake up, and ask, wait, are we watching the news or are we watching something from the 50s? And I'm tired, and it's almost embarrassing to still be at a point where are we watching the news or something from the 50s or something from the 1800s or something from so far ago? Because honestly, I feel like we keep going ahead a little bit and then going all the way back, and it's getting confusing for our children to understand when we read historical documents versus what they see on the news. It should not be almost the exact same thing verbatim. So it's almost an embarrassing kind of, we have got to make this planet better for our babies now. There's an urgency to make it stop now.
And I'm glad you're raising that. And the unfortunate thing is that, well, first of all, your students are fortunate to have a teacher like you. But the unfortunate thing is that so many people are not even getting that basic level of exposure or understanding. So they don't even see when the things are coming up again. If you go back and look at Woodrow Wilson's time as president, a very racist man who was also president of Princeton University, an avowed racist, and look at the policies that he put into place in the federal government when he was president, you see those policies being replicated in Project 2025 and with this Trump regime. And so, you know, when we're sitting around and just like, oh, you know, or not paying attention at all, like, hello, people. So anyway, by the way, I'm going to put this out for those of you who might be interested in continuing to learn, grow, subscribe to this channel. And I think in 2 weeks, we're going to have the author of this book as our guest. Rethinking Freedom is usually on Monday mornings at 7 a.m., but you can always access the videos later. He wrote The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. The government. So when they say, you know, why don't you pull yourselves up by your bootstraps? You know, we didn't own slaves. Like we need to understand our history. So Richard Rothstein is going to be with us on July 13th. And you can hear and see the research that has been done. All right, so let me see if we have our youngest person, and then please everybody else jump in as we get ready to wrap up here. Let me add you on. All right, so Mauro, how old are you and how was it participating in this?
I'm 11 and it was...
When did you turn 11?
March 22nd.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I said you were 10. So Daniel was the youngest. Daniel is 10. All right, so Mauro, what was it like being part of this?
It was fun. I didn't really know what I was reading though.
I appreciate your honesty. So when you were reading it though, did anything like stand out to you? Like what? Tell me about that.
Well, I kind of understood some of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he was talking about that people, like they say that they have something to their name, but they don't do what those people did.
So what do you think he was trying to say? Did you understand any part about that?
That like if you're gonna boast about someone who's in your family or like is a relative who did something good, you have to do this good stuff that they did.
Okay. All right. So what do you think your assignment will be moving forward, having participated in this?
I'm not really sure.
Okay. Well, we'll ask your mama. What was the process like for you being part of this?
Obviously, I've read this before. I think that, where we are, we don't celebrate July 4th. So this wasn't like a shift. And just educating Morrow over time as to the fact that 1776 many people, white males were free for the most part. And I think that's a conversation that is ongoing for us. Obviously, even just helping him understand why some of his friends who are Black or mixed race or Latino, and the disconnect with, he just asked me, I think you posted something about being apathetic. And so we talked about that and just him trying to reconcile, why do people go to bat for America in such a way that continues the oppressive dynamic that we continue to live through, but even knowing the foundation of this country. So I think for him, slowly is just understanding that we were all colonized. That's just the reality. Whether you're here in America or you are on the continent, all Black people were colonized, and trying to reconcile why a lot of people of color and Black people still in many ways support and side with oppressive dynamics is something that is an ongoing conversation to reconcile. Because I think that's what he was trying to point out, is like your actions and your words are not aligning, and you're constantly in many ways pushing forward narratives or dynamics that continue to keep us bound.
Thank you for sharing that. Tony, any comments?
Yeah, well, one, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do that we know about, and all the work that you do that we don't know about. It is humbling to sit amongst a group of people. I think it's really important. I'm a social worker and an author, and so thinking about, there's a power in organizing, there's a power in group dynamics, and I think we have to just do a better job of putting all the people in the rooms. And so for my young folks moving forward, know that there is power in you building relationships and exchanging information and learning in the group with friends that think differently than you and friends that think similar to you. I think it's incumbent upon us to continue to support the work that you're doing, Aya, and the work that we're all doing individually, so that we can make a greater impact collectively. And I also think it's important, reading through this, understanding your role in the stage of life that you're in. Unfortunately, as a social worker, I don't make a ton of money, but I understand in this system that in order to have some type of influence and support, we do need some type of revenue. So for my young, gifted, talented, and bright folks on this call, I want you to learn and grow. I want you to never be fearful of going to school or perfecting a trade or a skill so that you can earn some income, because you really can weld influence and support other people when you have a solid economic base. And I know that's not what we're talking about on here, but I do think it's important for you to develop yourself individually so that you can be stronger to support those collectively. And yes, I sit here, I don't know if it's a bit, not to minimize, but either bipolar or schizoaffective, because America's a system that I have benefited from. And folks that have looked like me have not benefited from it, and we've benefited simultaneously. So it's understanding, where do you fit within a system that was not designed for you? And we're steadily seeing that there are systems at play that are going to continuously make it not benefit you, but also you're still within the system. So how do you navigate holding these two things opposed with one another? And I think that is a lifelong process, and we just have to understand, as those, some of us on here can read, so that means that we benefit from this system. We have to think about our brothers and sisters that can't even get on here and read this this text. So yeah, that's just my thoughts, and I want to say thank you, Aya, for putting this together.
And y'all see right there why she is as amazing as I said she was, and why we should go and support her books as well. She's got great books for really people of all ages, but I'm looking at one across the room on my shelf that she wrote for kids that has this beautiful, adorable frog, but with such amazing. Take the Leap, is that the title?
The Scared Frog Takes the Leap.
The
Yes,
Scared
ma'am.
Frog Takes the Leap. But such a powerful message for all of us, actually, not just kids, because there are many of us adults who are not taking the leap either. All right, so we'll just go around the circle really quickly, or rectangle, however you're seeing it on your end. Any final thoughts as we wrap up? And thank you so much to all of you who've watched, stayed on with us, shared, subscribed, all of that. We're just doing the little bit we can do with the little bit we have. And if everyone does a little bit, we will absolutely create a country and a world that we want to live in. Because this anti-Blackness is not just in the United States of America, as we know. And it seems to be just like bearing fruit all across the world. So last comments from everybody. Yes, go ahead, Miss Karen.
I'm going to go really quickly because my battery's about to die. If you've been following the chat, and this is relevant, you see that there are those out there who will seek to distract you with their foolishness. And that is not to say they cannot be dangerous. However, the seed you water is the one that grows. So pay attention to where you give your attention and your time. In reading any words by anyone like Frederick Douglass and in his time, he literally had to watch over his shoulder for his life itself. We don't want to get to that point, but we're getting pretty close. So don't water that seed, but keep your head on a swivel.
Awesome. Who's going next? What's so funny is I know all of these people and they're all talkers, so I'm not even sure what's going on here. Okay, Dr. Nanali, you're next.
Once again, I'm still sitting with this. I read my part over and over, but to hear everyone else read their parts and the passion and the calmness that they put into their parts, I'm just still sitting with this. I'll probably be sitting with this for a couple of hours. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. It's, for me, it's still mind-boggling that if you know the history of Frederick Douglass, that he overcomes enslavement and then pursues his own education in such a way that he is able to write this back in 1852. And it's 2026, and some of us are like, well, what's that word again? How you say this word? You know, so just the importance of being literate, right? You know, and really engaging with words and understanding the power, which is why we just wanted people ages 8 through 30 to be a part of this. But so many people are out having fun. And so maybe if we had pre-recorded, we could have gotten more younger people. But even the adults, let me just call us out, parents. It was like, oh, well, they didn't want to do it. And I'm like, there is something about our young people engaging this information directly, not just listening. So even though Morrow is young and Daniel is young, they're not going to forget that they once read this. They're going to come back to it. They're going to understand it at a deeper level. It's going to change how they move through the world. So anyway, I'll be sitting with it as well, and had been sitting with it because I had to like break it up amongst all the different readers. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Nanali.
So the date that you said, 1852, I'm into genealogy. I'm telling y'all, I'm sitting with this. And one of my great grandmothers, she was free in 1850. She was a carpenter. I have it on record. And she was from Virginia. Okay, y'all. This is really a lot for me right now.
We're holding space for you. We're holding space for you. What I will say, and I think it's a Bernard Jones that said it in the chat, and I think it's also just very important to just what you said and what Ms. Shelton said as well, is that we are to move forward, and we must do it through our children by decolonizing their minds with our true history. But it must be done generationally. And I think that is where I live right now, very consciously and intentionally, is as much as possible, because right now we're in a stage where everything is literally being whitewashed. And a lot of information, there are things I'm finding out at 46 that I'm like, whoa. So I think for me, the impact and just what I'm moving forward with this is to continue to do the work with my son, and make sure that not only, because we are Nigerians as well, not only does he know the Nigerian history, but he knows the African American history, and the bringing together of that, and dispelling a lot of the division that has been seeded between Africans and African Americans for generations intentionally. So that's really, really where I'm living right now, is to just make sure that by the time he's my age, that he is rooted and grounded in the history, and he's not shaken and distracted, like Ms. Arnett said.
And thank you, Dr. Nonali. Whenever you want to come back in, we're here for you. Thank you for raising Bernard Jones, who we know as Babatunde in our community, and who was the founder, owner of a bookstore that was so impactful in our community for decades, called Under One Roof. And he's back in the community and everywhere, in his 70s, and his schedule is busier than mine is, I would say, and that's saying a lot. But you can just see his commitment to waking us all up, bringing us along, encouraging us wherever we may be. So thank you for noticing what he said about this needing to be intergenerational. He has definitely lived that for as long as I've known him and beyond. All right, let's hear from, again, Dr. Nonali, anytime you want to jump in. Let's hear from Kosi, and then Jennifer, if you have any last words.
I would just say I think that moments like this and spaces like these are very important in terms of like having these discussions about the reality of this country. As someone who is on the underside myself, like I wouldn't say that I necessarily celebrate 4th of July, because I agree that like we were not all independent then, but there's always events and things going on and things that you can do. And so even when my mom asked me, I was like, I'm planning to go to this or planning to go to that. But I'm like, I think it's about making the space for both. And I think that that's sometimes like what I try to remember is like, you can talk about the real history, you can talk about all the improvements and progress that needs to be made. And you can also not celebrate certain things, or, like it doesn't have to be always one or the other. But I think it's really important, especially on days like today, to start it off in that reality and grounding yourself before you let yourself get swept into all the fireworks and like, showing off kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. And for you as an aspiring lawyer, what do you take, if anything, from Frederick Douglass, who really laid this out like he was in a court of law, really?
I think I take out of it, which some of like you already talked about, but it really does matter who is making these laws and who is making these decisions, because it has the power and ramifications to do so much. Like I'm currently interning on the Hill, and you just see that like these certain people, like you said,
on what hill?
Oh, on Capitol Hill. Sorry. But you just see that like these people get to make decisions that have the power to, like we talked about, define who is a citizen, define who gets to have rights. And the same way that they can make those laws, they can be taken away. And so everybody needs to be like a lot more active and involved and conscious of what's going on.
All right. So really quickly, since I'm shouting out everybody else, I understand that you have a TikTok, something where you educate people or something like that. Do you want to share how people can follow you?
It's not always educational, but more so just like sharing my journey in law school. But it's just, if you type in my name, you'll see me. Nelly.
Okay. Well, whatever you're doing, I got a text message yesterday from a friend saying, "Oh, I saw your daughter's. It was recommended." And I was like, I don't have TikTok. I don't know what she's doing on there. I don't know. But she's my age and she was impressed by whatever that was. So kudos to you. All right. And Miss Lee.
Hype Rock. So he and I did have a little conversation after I finished reading my part, because, you know, we do have to, it's almost like, since I'm no longer in the classroom, I'm frustrated on one end because I'm not in the classroom because of the culture that has become public education. And I am one of those teachers who absolutely, they are talking about, I am the dangerous teacher who will absolutely, and, you know, tell children about their rights, and they have the right to have an issue, speak up, say something, contact their elected officials. Their elected officials also represent them. They have a right to address those who represent them. So I am the dangerous teacher that they worry about. But at the same time, I do wish that there were more teachers with that mindset still in the classroom. But that's why we have to work so hard on educating our own children in our community and within our realms, so that they're almost like implants in their classrooms, and they will be the voice that challenges what's being taught to them. They'll loudly challenge and boldly challenge what's being, you know, spoken over them, and say, actually, no, that's not how that happened. Actually, no, that's not the history of my people. Actually, no, can we have a different conversation about this? And then also come home and let parents know what's being taught in the classrooms, because they can send home all the information and lesson plans that they want. But what's actually being said in the classroom sometimes varies greatly from what we might see on a printed lesson plan or school newsletter. And so raising children who know exactly who they are, where they come from, and our real history means that we have people in the classroom who can speak up and speak out in ways that a parent can't always do it, a teacher can't always do it. It's just, there's power in young people and their voices, because this is their world. We're just living in it at this point. And I've always had that mindset of, honestly, I'm just trying to make the path better. When you're talking about someone being a trailblazer, you're literally just someone who is cutting down all the weeds so everybody else can come behind and do the thing.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to cut down the weeds.
Yeah.
So everybody else can come on. Yeah. But that's why this is important, to put this in the hands of young people and help them understand what's happening as we're looking at the ooh and ah and over fireworks. Let's talk about, well, what would that have meant from the cotton field to watch the fireworks? I've always had that question since I was young. What were all the people that look like me doing while all these people over here were celebrating freedom? And did no one feel awkward celebrating freedom in front of those they enslaved? Did no one feel awkward about that? So I've been having these thoughts for a while now, but thank you so much for this opportunity to participate.
Thank you.
And for this one to hear everybody's discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. They may have hopefully, well, no, I wouldn't even blaspheme in this way. I know that there were certainly some who would have been like the Samuel L. Jackson character in Django, who were like, "We is free." No, you ain't free. But I think that, we know it's documented that the larger numbers of us continue to fight, continue to agitate for our freedom in a variety of ways, including poisoning some of these racists. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Dr. Nonali, would you like to say anything else? No? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone again. Listen, this should not be a one and done. So maybe we make this a tradition. Maybe we start earlier and we don't do it on July 4th. We record our young people, reading smaller portions of this earlier so that we can get them engaged. Because again, I know the way I learn, it's one thing to hear, it's another thing to read, to digest, to try and process yourself. So if this is something that you would like to see more of, let us know. If you know young people that you would like to have engaged, we can start talking about it for next year. Let's do it. We are responsible. No one is coming to save us. And so for me, my thought process is always, what can I do? And it may just impact one, or maybe it's just impacting me at this point. But still, what can I do? Because what I cannot do is fold my hands and pray and hope and put my faith in avowed racists to have any respect for my humanity. Well, thank you all. Thank you all. Please subscribe. Please share. Come back. We are doing great work, I believe, at Rethinking Freedom every single week. If you've not listened to the conversation that we had with Kyle T. Mays, I was looking around to see if I had his book right here, The History of Afro-Indigenous People in the United States of America. That was last week. That was this Monday. Yeah, so we're still this week. Yeah, go back and listen to it. We had a conversation with Gerald Horne, the preeminent historian for the United States, if you ask me. And we had Dr. Orozco talking about Mexican civil rights movement, Mexican American civil rights movement. And sometimes we don't even think about that. And when we're talking about colored and white, like where did everybody else fall into play? I mean, when you think of the fact that when the United States of America was supposedly declaring its independence from England, that the owners, the indigenous people of this land, weren't even part of that. They weren't quote unquote citizens, nor should they have necessarily wanted to be. But it's wild. And so the other thing we're also going to be doing on Rethinking Freedom is actually going through the Declaration of Independence. It's another document that we say we know about, but many of us have never read through. So we're going to be talking about the Declaration of Independence. We're going to be going through all three stanzas of the United States national anthem, which is why I don't stand for the anthem anymore. And if most of us knew what that third stanza says, you will sit your butt down too. We're going to talk about the pledge and when these things came into being, because these are all quote unquote symbols, elements of patriotism. But what is the definition of being a U.S. patriot? And what does that mean to you as someone who falls out of the scope of the people who they considered human? And by the way, white women, that includes you. All right, y'all. So we'll see you next time. Let's see. Terani says, oh, then thank you so much for joining too, Terani, and for being one of our readers. She says, I celebrate Tuskegee Founders Day, 1881. See a lot of thank yous. Yes, thank you to all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome. So we'll see you out in these streets. Enjoy, be safe, and stay Black.